Hi, Chris Duff over at Serious Land Capital, vacant land funding partner. So I keep wanting to introduce, some more case studies of land deals, either ones that we've fully completed or, ones that have come up recently, because that's our specialty, right? So we see tons of different situations come up and easy areas to get tripped up in. So one that came up yesterday, so this was on Alicia Jarrett's Deal or No Deal session biweekly on Tuesdays at 3 p.m. Central. If you're interested in joining some of those, myself and a few of the other known funders within the land industry space, kind of go over people's deals and critique them accordingly. It's been a pretty positive experience for all involved, if I do say so myself, and a lot of teaching can happen accordingly. So, there was one that showed up I thought was a pretty interesting deal. It was roughly 10-ish acres, a little bit more than that, in southern Alabama, actually a county that we've worked in before. There was a bit of slope to it. I mean, quite rural, but, did have road access and power, maybe even public water lined up to it. It was a little unclear about that. Yeah, I mean, the slope wasn't perfect, but it wasn't like a complete detriment to not be able to build a residential house on it. So a few interesting notes about this property. One is that the current owner had bought it for $34,000 in sometime in 2021. I want to say it was mid 2021, but either way, that was like a full bull run year regardless. And he wanted to sell the property. The seller wanted to sell the property for $40,000, now roughly 4-ish years later. So usually, and I know I've commented on this many times before, is that you really want to be cautious about buying any properties from sub 5-year holds from a seller, particularly if they are making a profit on the property. You have to be cautious. You have to look at, okay, was the transaction arm's length or not? Arm's length means, was it a close family relation or friend or whatever, possibly quit claim deed. That would not be our arm's length, or if the seller is just kind of transferring properties between a trust they might control or a state and so forth. So you have to be, do your diligence looking at the names of those involved. And sometimes, family relations might not have the same last name or anything. So, still have to be cautious of that. But if it is a not arm's length transaction, I'm usually far less concerned about that, just because, the dynamics are much different. It's not necessarily reflecting market price, but especially if it was an on-market sale within the last 5 years, that gives me the most concern. And, being arm's length. If it was an off-market sale and still arm's length, that's probably in the medium range out of those scenarios where, it's not necessarily representing market value. Maybe they were just trying to offload it. It could have still been to, like a neighbor in the area. Who knows how that transaction was facilitated? So a little bit more gray area there. But in terms of, again, just to summarize it, most risk is on market, arm's length transaction. Middle ground is off market, not arm's length transaction. And then least risk is not arm's length transaction that occurred at that point of sale. So just want to keep that in mind. And then another pretty interesting part of this deal, and what sometimes can be a red herring, is that the very next door neighbor property with near identical characteristics in terms of like the actual terrain sold almost exactly 2 years ago for $170,000. And that one was on the MLS, publicly listed. A couple key notes about that is that they did have power hooked up, which shouldn't really impact the neighboring lot. That should be easy to get, wiring over there. They also had public water connected fully. onto the property. They had a driveway and some clearing done for a home site, and they had some type of covering for RV units. Not like a crazy improvement or anything. I doubt that would add more than like roughly 20 grand or so of value add, but the driveway and utilities and so forth, making it more turnkey, the clearing for home site. Plus, they got the driveway up on a ascending slope. That was a fair amount of work, but considering the neighboring property, if you're buying at 40,000, do you think, even if you cut off half the price of that 170K from 2 years ago, and early 2023 wasn't like the best market either. That was already inflationary, high interest rate environment. So it wasn't quite the bull run that was, pre-mid 2022, for example. So then, it becomes kind of interesting to consider that. To me, regardless, though, it's, there was enough value add there, and we're not sure, like maybe there was another, and I think that 170K sale also had a mortgage attached to it. So you're never quite sure whether there was a like land home transaction, maybe like a mobile home were included in it. The updated aerials didn't seem to indicate that, but you have to be cautious when there seems to be like a pretty significant additive portion in value to similar lots that is like out of range of what might be seen in surrounding acreage. And even if like, a home portion wasn't listed on the actual listing, you can't necessarily know for sure, because maybe they put that part of the deal together outside of the purchasing the land piece. So, and it was still included like, okay, yeah, this piece of land sold with some of the value add, but not necessarily indicating, hey, like mobile home's coming with this. So you could try reaching out to that realtor, figure out what the situation was, which would be recommended. But something to consider. But even if it's a next door neighbor lot, virtually in every case, anything beyond a sold comp of 12 months lagging, I'm going to discount unless there's really no other option. And either way, I'm going to significantly discount anything, just because markets change so rapidly. And even if it was next door like 2 years ago, you really can't count on that market being realistic for whatever today's environment is. So it's easy to like look at one property that's not even a one-to-one identical piece, especially with the value add on there, and like kind of treat that and overweight it in favor of what you're buying a neighboring lot for. And it can be a bit of a red herring from value. So even if I'm looking at other more recent comps that aren't necessarily as close, but similar terrain and so forth, I'm still going to take those as primary when I'm assessing the per acre value of the surrounding region, assuming those type of sold comps are available. It's worth noting that neighbor one, but like that wouldn't be the primary. Whereas I know a lot of newer investors or even more experienced ones be like, oh yeah, next door neighbor sold, who cares what the sold date was? Or at least, within the last 5 years or so, they still might attribute a lot of value to it. I would just be very cautious about that. So looking at the surrounding sold comps, it seemed like similar terrain could still move for, $80,000, $90,000. So, even buying at 40K, the seller's getting profit on it and still seems to be selling under market value. It still seemed like a pretty good deal to me. I'm just introducing the caveat that I would consider other more recent comps, but still of similar terrain, to be of higher priority versus getting stuck on that neighboring lot that also had a whole bunch of other things going on with it. Again, you could check with the realtor and see what happened with it, like really double down more in there. That would be smart, especially in today's environment. But just wanted to mention another case study that I think would be helpful as you are looking at various situations like this. If you're looking for funding, seriousland.capital, a zero cost review of your land deals at Land Daily Diligence Facebook group. Remember, on April 17th, myself, Dave Deniston, Justin Sleva will be hosting a hot seat unconference session for 2 of you land investors. So if you want a dedicated hot seat session, getting coached by ourselves as industry experts who've been doing this a long time, let me know ASAP. Those spots are going to go quickly here. And then landpricer.ai have a bunch of big meetings, including with the Land ID partnership team in like roughly an hour here. More to follow up on in regards to that. With that, subscribe and share. Take care, everybody. Bye.